This is The Convergence.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of The Convergence. This is the international edition of The Convergence today because our guest is on the other side of the world. I think, Matthias, what are you, 4 o'clock there, 5 o'clock there in Zurich?
Yes, it's 4 o'clock over here in Switzerland. So thank you so much for having me, Derrick.
Absolutely. So you are 1 hour away from happy hour for the weekend. So thanks for joining me so early in the morning my time and so late in the day yours. Folks, Matthias Weissl is the CEO, correct, of Verum Capital?
Yes, that's correct.
And we connected through a very odd set of circumstances. I have one part of my family who I have never met in person actually is spread out over Australia and Europe. And recently I was having a Zoom coffee with one of my cousins who never met in person. And we start chatting about blockchain. And he's like, I got to introduce you to the man. I'm like, okay. And I think this is probably like our fifth call now. I mean, we've had a lot of great conversations about the things that I'm working on here in the States and the things that you're working on in Zurich. And it's exciting. And I'm so happy too, because Matthias is going to be in Arizona later this year. My new podcast studio is being built and launched right around that time. So I'm sure Matthias will be a recurring guest, but welcome. Thanks for dialing in from the whole way on the other side of the world.
Great. Thank you so much, Derrick, for having me. Yes, happy hour is away probably an hour, but it consists of cheese only in Switzerland. But,
cheese only. Wow. Okay. All right. No alcohol, no anything else. That's it. Just cheese.
No, that's it, you know. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation today.
Absolutely. Well, listen, let's talk a little bit first about Verum Capital, how you got started in this. What's the background? I've been really impressed through the conversations we've had, and I was looking around for other sort of blockchain incubator accelerators that were around the world, and you're one of the first results. I mean, you come up as one of the most successful, I think, well established too. I mean, this is not like most other blockchain projects or crypto projects where it's 6 months old. I mean, you guys are the grandfathers here, in the acceleration space when it comes to blockchain and Web 3.0 technologies. How about give us a little background on that?
Yeah, sure. So a little background about Verum Capital. We founded Verum 5 years ago in Zurich, Switzerland, at a time where ICO boom was really happening, or even before the ICO boom. And today, maybe I'll give some background how everything evolved. But
please,
who are we today? We're a Web3 venture studio that has really evolved through multiple crypto cycles, and we have seen some down cycles and some up cycles, and we've delivered projects with a lot of breadth and depth. And most importantly, I think our values remain intact. We are ready for the next wave and the one after that and the one after that. And what do we do as a venture studio? Our work consists of 3 pillars in simple terms. We design, we build, and we invest. So we design token-enabled ecosystems that bring new value and new forms of ownership to users. We build. So our development team has experience building scalable products and shipping secure and reliable code on different blockchains, which is important. And we invest. We invest in accelerate, co-venture in Web3 products, companies, and ideas. And how do we work? Our ideal way of working is to invest in, to incubate ideas with co-investments from our ecosystem and ship valuable products that support our vision for the whole Web3 space. And we took this approach for the following reason. So our offering has obviously evolved since our founding in 2017, 2018, after the first ICO boom. So in the first 5 years, in the past 5 years, we have had over 90 engagements across the globe with blockchain, Web3, DLT, whatever it was called back then, companies or traditional companies. We've worked with 5 major national governments on blockchain-related topics. We've worked with 20 plus financial institutions. We've delivered over 35 strategic projects globally. And we helped also design more than 50 products, platform, protocol, concepts. And we have shipped now more than 5 products. And
wow.
we've worked through almost 2 full crypto cycles, which is also important because this really changed our company. We've had to adapt to the market. In 2019, for example, we had governments telling us, please do not mention crypto, for the fear that the project would be associated in some sort of fashion with Bitcoin and the negative perceptions around it. Now we have organizations of all types and sizes approach us because they want to tap into the token-enabled ecosystem. They want to accelerate or amend their offerings in Web3 principles or DeFi logics. And yes, also although we have worked in an evolving space, our ideals, most importantly, have remained intact. In 2018, our byline was Future of Finance, and we have really come back to that. And of course, we're not idealists, nor do we pretend to know this Web3 experiment, how it will unfold. But collectively, at least, our team is very passionate and very almost obsessed about the deconsolidation of power in tech and finance, the community creation, the operation, the ownership, especially when it comes to creative capital in the digital realm, and but also creating non-extractive business models or economic growth through access and increased participation. Yeah. And we just want to be a part of this paradigm shift. We believe that Web3 can be a catalyst for positive societal change, but we're also not naive enough to think that we know exactly how this will play out, and we will not know how this will end up.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting point that I've come from a background, I've worked in private equity, and years ago when I was starting out as an entrepreneur, so much was based upon your 3 and your 5 year plan. I don't hear a lot about 3 and 5 year plans anymore. I hear about, what are we working on next week? What are we working on next quarter? And next quarter is a little bit of a stretch. I do believe that we have, as a business society, pulled back a little bit and said, look, if we get too focused on mission, vision, and goals, we run the risk of missing the opportunity. Because the 5 year, if we think back to how different was the world in 2017 versus 2022? I mean, it's a century in technology time. It's a century in business practices. I mean, this is pre-COVID. I think it's sort of like the AD BC kind of thing. Some point we'll talk about the PC, the pre-COVID and the post-COVID, because the world is a very, very different place. And that requires us to become much more nimble. I don't spend my time anymore thinking about 3 and 5 years from now. I can't predict 60 days. So how in the world am I going to predict something that's out that far? To that point, I think I'm glad that you started talking about the cycles, because there are a lot of naysayers right now that are talking about, the death of crypto, Bitcoin going to zero, all of these kind of things. And I think the challenge is, the thing that these folks don't understand is that in the mid 90s, when we had the .com bust, that wasn't the end of the internet. If anything, you could see that as almost the catalyst point where the internet emerged from the primordial soup of what it had been and became productized. And I do believe that there is a cycle to this, and I'd love for you to comment on that. I think you always start to see towards the end of these cycles, and now that I'm going to be 50 next year, I've experienced multiple business cycles. But when companies get less focused on profitability and making money, and their entire focus is just upon gaining market share, that's when I start pulling my things out of the market and say, okay, we're about ready to go through the purge. The clock is going to strike midnight, and all of the things are going to change and things are going to fall out. But from the backside of that, the companies that did devote time and energy and money to being profitable and creating utility tend to thrive coming out of the backside of that. I'd love to hear your thoughts, having gone through 2 cycles, and I know we're relatively early in on the second cycle here, but what are your thoughts? I mean, what are the patterns that you're seeing? And based upon the last pattern that you saw, what do you think is next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, we see a lot of negative patterns, I have to say. But let's look at the our thesis where we say which is needed in order to be successful. And I would like to make a little sports metaphor. I used to play professional basketball before I realized that I'm just not good enough, or too short overall, probably. And you really have to be quite athletic to make it in the Web3 space. You have to be very athletic. So your athleticism is key. And athleticism, and the way we say it, is made up of endurance, agility, and focus in this case. So endurance is really to persevere, to see the opportunity on the horizon. In Web3, you always have to really see the opportunity on the horizon, not the one in your immediate hand, because that will absolutely destroy you. Agility, you need to be able to adapt and respond to market conditions. So we, as a company, we have never taken on external capital. We've never taken on external capital. So obviously, a bull market and a bear market will make changes to your company. So you need to be able to work agile, very simple. And focus. You need to somehow stay true to your thesis and resist the easy wins and quick payouts. And I'll give you an example. In the first year that where we created Verum Capital, we had hundreds of companies come to us wanting to conduct ICOs and just some odd business models around that. And the first thing we did was not take on in the first 2 months, take on the two best paying clients. We did the opposite. We didn't take on a single one. We said, we're going to spend the first 2 months to create a 500 KPI framework on how to conduct due diligence on these projects. So for the first 2 months, we didn't take on any. Then we created the due diligence framework, and then we started taking on. Yes, we could have easily not resisted this urge to take the quick payout, but we did not. And I think the endurance, agility, and focus is important, because at the end of the day, I wouldn't even say it's a sprint. So the whole Web3 world is not a sprint. It's also not a marathon, in our opinion. It's more like a relay. Some players out there, they will sprint fast, and you will learn from them. And we love when people do sprints, because then we can learn from that.
Learn from their mistakes of Yeah, that really does make a lot of sense. And I love your sports analogy there. I mean, I love sports analogies as well. And I think the way that you just explained this, and I have some friends that are coaches and management for professional teams, and they say that sort of same thing. Your objective is to win the game. Your objective is to bring the cup home. But the stats are the really important thing. Like how are the statistically, how are my individual team members performing? And, are they improving? Because if they are, then overall, I have a more higher likelihood of winning the game and winning the championship. But you've got to break it down to those little sort of steps. And I love the sprint, the sprint marathon relay example as well, because I think you're right. I think it's impossible right now to predict where the future is going. So you have to operate in that agile perspective. You have to be able to see what the future potentially is, but then modify your activity and your behavior as you approach that goal based upon, what factors you see. A great golf analogy for that is, look, if it's a par 4, most people aren't trying to get the ball in the hole. You're trying to set up your next shot and set up your next shot and get your approach ready, because look, there are people that have hit holes in ones on par 4, but they're so rare that it's just not worth trying for. It's way better to just continually hit the ball down the fairway in order so that when you are close enough to make that shot, you're able to do it. So I think that's a great example. So I want to talk with you for a few moments about Evergreen Carbon Credits, one of the sponsors of this show. I started working with Evergreen when I was telling a friend of mine who's involved with that company about my efforts to try to learn more about blockchain, NFTs, crypto, all the things in this space. And he showed me Evergreen. Evergreen was a really unique solution. I've looked at carbon credits in the past. I've been in the sustainability industry for almost 15 years. I understood what they were. You were buying an offset to offset the carbon footprint that you or your company has. But I also understood the challenges with that. they're sold in very, very large blocks, and then people break those blocks up and try to sell individual credits or small clusters of credits to businesses, and that creates some room for fraud, for people to not be up and up on what that project is, if that carbon credit is real, and there's challenges with that. And you can Google it right now and find there's a big case in Europe going on about fraudulent carbon credits. But what Evergreen did, I thought, was really unique. They took this idea of NFTs and they took blocks of carbon credits and broke those things down into tens of thousands or even millions of individual carbon credits. They can actually fraction those even out to a tenth of a carbon credit if they needed to. And they were able to then create a smart contract around that carbon credit so that you can track it back to its origin. You can find out what project it was associated with, but you are also guaranteed that the carbon credits you're getting from Evergreen are the real deal. You get that certificate, you get that certification that only the blockchain can do. So that's why it made sense for them to come on as a sponsor of this show. We're talking about all this new technology, and with new technology comes higher energy usages in some senses. And Evergreen is here to help offset that. If you want to look to maybe improve your image in the marketplace, maybe you're looking to offset some of your carbon footprint, not even just for your image, but actually for the sake of the planet, head on over to evergreencarboncredits.com and check out what they do. You can buy credits for as little as $11, and you'll get the certificate and the NFT that you can put in your wallet that shows that you've actually made that contribution. And that money, particularly right now with the projects they're working on, is going to reforestation in the Amazon. I think that's something we can all really get behind, particularly when we understand that the environment, the climate we're all connected to it. It doesn't matter if we're putting off emissions here in the US or if it's happening in Mexico. It all contributes to the same global problem. So why not be part of a global solution with Evergreen Carbon Credits?
There's a few projects, but let's dive into some of them. In general, our projects are very diverse. They give us a perspective that is very difficult to accumulate over the years, unless you have been in the trenches very deep, and have allowed us to pursue our current interests in the Web3 space. And one project is, for example, the Water DAO. It's an example of a venture that enables the collective management of a precious resource and an alignment of interest for all stakeholders through a distributed autonomous organization. The venture owns water extraction rights, but as opposed to just commercializing on the value of water, the water extraction right is placed in a treasury governed by its governance token holders, by the community. So the 51 or 66% of the community decides. So what value add does this bring? We can, at the end of the day, we can remove speculation around asset ownership. We can stabilize the price of precious assets and by removing volatility. We can establish some sort of price equilibrium amongst all the stakeholder groups, because the problem is today, one can only buy water to consume or buy to speculate on it, which is an issue because there is speculation-driven investments could negatively impact the price of the daily consumers. And the interests between investors and consumers are completely misaligned. And that is an issue when it comes to water, to really a precious resource as there is. Our approach here is we tokenize water extraction rights, and the governance of the treasury via the governance token holders is really deciding what to do with this water. And today, people buy water to consume, and this is what we allow by tokenizing this water. People can buy the token in order to consume water. People can buy another token in order to lend it when they're experiencing a surplus. When I have too much water, I can lend it to others. What does this do? It generates interest for me, but also it stabilizes the overall price within the ecosystem. And third of all, according to the SDGs, people or governments are willing to pay a premium as an insurance product to secure access to water at some point in the future. And that also, this premium being put in the treasury will also stabilize the price. Therefore, the price for the community is lower than traditional water. People can decide what to do. The whole ecosystem can also decide what should the cost be of water, what should the margin be, etc., etc. And if two people are too greedy and they want too big of a margin, they still need to convince the other, 10,000 people involved. And if they're not happy with it, then they can leave. So I think this is a very self-incentivation.
Yeah. So let's chat about that for a minute. So the token isn't representative of a number of gallons. It's representative of an extraction right, a percentage of an extraction right. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Very interesting. And you're creating a DAO there, a decentralized autonomous organization. Is that a legal structure in Europe yet, or is it more a contract structure?
So there's multiple jurisdictions where it is fully legal, obviously, to set up a DAO. Even in the US, a DAO can be set up.
We've got a couple states now, right? I know Tennessee, I think, is going to come online next month as well. So I know there's some challenges to it here because it is limited in where you can form them.
Yes, of course. And I don't want to make do any marketing for any jurisdiction because every jurisdiction has some pros and cons, but it is obviously legally possible. And that is also very important because the stakeholders also need some legal protection around their voting rights. And at the end of the day, what's most important, people realize that a voting right actually is worth something. People always thought, a governance token, I don't know, it's not a share. I don't have the protection around this. But in reality, if you are capable of voting of a treasury and this treasury is worth, hundreds of millions of liters of water, then all of a sudden this governance is very important. And the good thing is with a DAO, one could argue, play devil's advocate and say, but what if one person buys 60% of all the water? It's very simple. In a DAO structure, you can say that the maximum percentage of ownership can be 1%. So it's very simple. It allows you to really have a fully decentralized ecosystem and align the interest of all the stakeholders to manage a collective good.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. I'm hemming and hawing on this end because I'm thinking about votes in general, and I think here in the U.S., I don't know how it is in Europe, but we don't put a lot of value even on our political votes. Only a very small fraction of people actually do vote. And a lot of times it's because they feel like there's no value to it. They feel like it doesn't really matter. But I think if you break that down and you say, look, we have $25 billion, $25 trillion in debt as a country, and you break that down by how many people vote, now your vote's actually worth a couple of $100,000, your contribution to this decision-making process. And I just think the way that you explained that sort of made me think I need to write an article about the value of voting and really break it down to that, that cost basis of what it is actually worse from that perspective. So you're seeing this, is this something you're seeing as becoming more widespread? Do you think, particularly here in the Southwest? I've got to tell you, I'm interested in this idea because we're struggling with water now. The Colorado River is running dry. Our dams are running dry. There is talk that next year here in Arizona, we'll be required to reduce our water usage by 30%, and it'll just be mandatory. And either you'll be fined if you use too much, or the cost of water, once, let's say your water bill is $100 a month, if you go over, let's say $80 a month, they'll charge you a fee, which you would have wished you would have just gone to the grocery store and bought gallons for that, because the fee for that will go up, to an extraordinary cost. How do you see that now? Is that something that you're seeing becoming more globalized, where the commons, things that are, air, water, I know carbon credits and carbon offsets have sort of done this, but you're similar to what you're doing with water.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this will really be the future. I'm not saying this is the only way of doing it, but this is one way of doing it. And what it really does, let's take an example, not only water, but also, real estate. Especially in Switzerland, I would say the majority of individuals in Switzerland are not able to buy their own home because it's simply too expensive.
True.
So obviously, purchasing your own home is only for a very high socioeconomic class. And in this case, the fractionalization of ownership of very precious goods, which also real estate is one, really provides access to people. It provides access to the retail, and it also aligns interests. It's very simple. Imagine if you tokenize, your favorite bagel shop around the corner, Derrick. Mm-hmm. If you tokenize this and you say, okay, I would like a security token of this bagel shop, and this security token gives me a fee reduction of every time I go there and eat a bagel. So there's immediately an alignment between a shareholder and a consumer. And This is exactly what token-enabled ecosystems allow. Alignment between shareholders, users, investors, producers. And this is not only water. This was just one example. If I can dive into a second project, which...
Yeah, please.
Or maybe the concept of the project is actually not only in this specific project, but in multiple asset classes relevant. So I'll be a bit vague here.
Yeah, please.
So the second project I would like to speak to about is really an example of a project that is creating a completely new and original marketplace concept that empowers individuals, facilitates direct transactions, and brings real cash flows on chain. So these are individuals, but also entities. And we think it will be an early example of how individuals and their communities can collaborate to achieve success that has historically been reserved for an elite few. And it's basically a marketplace that allows individuals or entities, as well as project teams, entering competitive and high-grossing industries or launching a high-potential venture to finance the early stages of their careers by tokenizing a portion of their future earnings.
I've always hoped that this would come about, right? I grew up very, I don't want to use the word poor, but college was never an option for me growing up as a kid. Mm-hmm. Like that was just wasn't even something I was even told about until I was probably 19 years old, So yeah, I love this sort of concept of investing in somebody early on and then earning a percentage of their earnings based upon that, because it isn't as much the entrepreneur's idea that's successful. It's the entrepreneur themselves become a success. And we've all seen this. It's multiple times. You have to fail a few times before you can become a success. And so I love this idea of tokenizing this. Please continue on with that. You got me excited about that.
Yeah, and it's not only about individuals. So the concept is much broader than just individuals. And I fully agree. Me as a former basketball player, I also would have loved some extra money to travel to basketball camps, etc., which I couldn't afford. And so it's empowering individuals with financial tools and flexibility that have been typically reserved for the corporations only. And it also allows the creation of sophisticated auctions and incentive structures. Not only, please, Derrick, or you give me 10% of future cash flows of the IP that your company has created. But also it has incentive structures that I can support this IP, that I can build on this IP, that, through automation, through the use of smart contracts. And this is only capable via bringing real cash flows on chain to be redistributed through some sort of digital currency. And I'll give you a concrete example. In the pharma industry, there's tons of companies that are between the first phase, the second phase, the third phase, clinical phase, etc., life science. They're all in this area, and they're all seeking funding. And they have great ideas often, but they all seek funding. And what they do, they sell their shares and their voting power away to the big pharma players that then take advantage, because obviously being already a major shareholder then at this point, taking advantage of guiding this team in the direction that is most interesting for them. Now there's a different way of doing it. You sell your tokenized IP in a preclinical phase to the broad mass, to the people. And as opposed to giving away equity and voting rights, you give a small portion of your future revenues to the people, and therefore you're still in control. You're not losing control, and you're all of a sudden you have alignment of maybe 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 people, and this really empowers also again collectively working towards a goal. And I think this is not only for the individual, this is not only for the pharma space, this is really for any service, any product that requires heavy upfront payment and is therefore only accessible to a very elite few.
Well, and to that point, it reminds me of a conversation I've had in the last week. I've been working with a company that does some research and development for pharmaceutical companies. And many times when things go into clinical trials or when they go into testing, the people who really are the stakeholders are the patients and the healthcare professionals, but they're not the ones that are footing the bill, or they're not the ones that have any voting interest in this at all, right? It's the pharmaceutical companies that have the control of where the conversation goes, how the drug gets deployed, all those kind of things. But the reality is the shareholder, the stakeholder in this thing is the person that's suffering with that rare form of cancer. And their voice could be really important to that. But I also would say for my mom passed away of breast cancer. I still donate to this day to breast cancer awareness. I still know they donate this day to that because I'm aligned with those things, right? I'm aligned in seeing a cure happen so other people don't have to go through those same things. Mm-hmm. So I love what you're talking about here. And I absolutely see how the adoption of that can be really important. Now, is it, when you're talking about the tokenization, are you talking about tokenization of the company or tokenization of just the IP, or maybe both?
Both is possible. From a technical perspective, there's barely any difference. Some investors want exposure to the entire company. Some only want a specific product. So both is possible, and that's up to the entire ecosystem to decide. Mm-hmm.
Well, Matthias, let's do this. I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to keep you on the line because I want to continue to record for another episode. But we've hit about 30 minutes. So, hey, everybody, thanks for listening in to this episode of The Convergence. I'm going to keep Matthias here. We're going to do a part 2, right? We're just going to record it right now because I think we're only about halfway there of the things we want to chat with. But make sure to like and subscribe. Continue to tune in where every week here on The Convergence, we're talking about all of the things that are going to affect the world over the next 5, 10, even 20 years. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.